I'll give that new house you just bought to my parents, or else we're getting divorced. The quarrels start early in the morning, as if I don't already have enough on my plate with work deadlines and raising our kids. He sulks around threatening divorce, but he wasn't always like this. Just a year ago, he was a decent man. Why do mother-in-laws always have to stir the pot and turn their sons against their wives? My name is Nancy. I'm 49 years old, and I make a living as a comic book artist. I was initially just an editor and artist with my husband, Luke, who's 9 years younger. We bonded over our shared interests, started hanging out at Comic-Cons, and one thing led to another. We were a couple. No grand gestures, no public announcements, just quietly became a couple. Before we knew it, 8 years had passed. We never really had any desire to get married, so we were comfortable in our companionship. However, everything changed when we decided to adopt. Please come to the hospital immediately. I got a call from a nurse in the middle of my workday. She told me that my brother and his wife had been in a car accident. I rushed to the hospital where the doctors broke the news to me. They didn't make it. Losing our parents in our 30s was hard, but my brother and I were adults with our own lives. We managed to get through. My brother, unlike me, was married to a wonderful woman, so our family line was secure, or so I joked. I was content with my single life. After years of trying, my brother and his wife were blessed with twins, a moment of joy for all of us. However, the twins couldn't leave the hospital with their mother after birth as they were jaundiced and needed to stay in for a few days. The new parents were commuting to the hospital daily to see their infants when a drunk driver took them away, leaving the twins behind. Afterward, there were relatives who aimed for my brother and his wife's inheritance and expressed interest in adopting the twins, but with firm intention to protect these precious lives that my beloved sibling had left behind. Not for money, I initiated the adoption process for the twins. In this process, I faced harsh criticism from many relatives and some even severed ties with me. Fortunately, right after the Lehman shock, I had purchased 3 one-room apartments in the Marina district. I was living in one and renting out the other 2. Apart from my earnings as a comic book artist, I also had a steady rental income. So I had both a place to live and enough income to raise children. However, I had overlooked something crucial. I had never been married, nor had I ever raised a child. At the time, I was so focused on protecting the twins that I hadn't taken into account what would come next. I was able to take a break from my ongoing comic series and somehow manage unfamiliar household chores and child rearing. It was already a huge task to care for one infant, but I was thrown into the deep end, having to take care of 2 at the same time, and it was hectic every day. Seeing me run ragged by the twins, Luke, my editor, suddenly proposed to me, saying, "Miss Nancy, will you marry me?" I had lived for 49 years, had a couple of lovers in the past, but as I was absorbed in my work, my marriageable age had passed without me noticing. Also, having continued a vague relationship, more than friends but less than lovers, for 8 years, I couldn't find the meaning to get married now and was unable to respond to his proposal. As I was looking down, lost in thought, one of the twins, my son, started crying loudly using his whole body. Whether he wanted milk, a diaper change, or was just angry at being woken up, I wasn't sure. There, it's okay, don't cry. As soon as I picked up the eldest twin, he stopped crying, but I couldn't pick up the younger twin and he continued crying. That's when Luke immediately picked up the younger son and started soothing him. "See, at times like this, you can't hold both of them at once, right? Would you make me their father?" he asked. "But you understand that I'm 49 years old and already have 2 kids, right? You're young and I'm married, so it would be better for you to find a woman of childbearing age," I replied. But when I said this, Luke responded, "Even though I'm 9 years younger, I'm 40, I'm already quite the middle-aged man. Would you be convinced if I say I want to spend the rest of my time with you?" As Luke said this, looking into my eyes, I thought, maybe it's too much for me to raise twins alone. Perhaps the presence of a father is indeed necessary. With that feeling prevailing, I humbly accept your proposal. "I will strive and dedicate myself as a wife and mother," I replied to him. And so we got married and we're planning to live peacefully and happily ever after as a family of 4, but I can't stand this anymore. The one-room apartment, which I had never minded when I was single, had become too cramped since the twins' arrival. With an increasing amount of stuff, there was barely any room to walk around. Despite being newly married, my husband's belongings remained at his parents' house, and it wasn't practical for a family of 4 to live in this one-room apartment. Realizing that it was not environmentally suitable for raising children, both physically and otherwise, I decided to buy a house. Let's move to a spacious house where a family of 4 can live comfortably. Once I made up my mind, I immediately took action. At first, I was looking for used properties and ready-built houses which could be moved into immediately, but I could not find any that met my criteria, like proximity to the train station and having a garden. So my husband and I decided to find a suitable piece of land and build a custom home. A 49-year-old mother who's a comic book artist and a 40-year-old husband with a regular job. We thought that we could easily get a housing loan from the bank, but due to my unstable income and the repayment period, we faced several issues, and contrary to our expectations, we couldn't get the loan. With no choices left, we thought about taking out a loan together, but my husband had already taken a loan in his name to renovate his parents' house. Not only that, he also had a car loan. The only way for us to buy a house for our family was to prepare cash. Alright, let's sell the one-room apartment in the Marina District. They had appreciated in value since I purchased them about 14 years ago and were now worth more than twice the purchase price. I decided to sell my 2 properties with the estimated price that I could afford a newly built detached house with a garden in the suburbs. Without sticking to the city center, I can afford a house in the suburbs with a garden. I decided to keep the remaining property where I currently lived until the new house was finished. So, using my network of friends and acquaintances, I was able to find a piece of land, design the floor plan, and sign a contract with a construction company that would build my dream house. All that was left was to persevere in this cramped one-room apartment until the new house was completed. But just as I was gearing up, the intercom rang. When I checked the camera, there stood my husband's parents. "Hello, you're there, right? Open the door already." Taken aback by their sudden visit, I unlocked the door and hurried to the entrance to welcome them. "Oh, Nancy, thank you for letting us in. We heard from Luke that you're building a new house because the current room is too small. It's strange to chat standing up. Can we talk inside?" And with those words, they practically barged in, more like home invaders than guests. "Luke's at work today, right? We heard you work from home, so we came to check on you." I couldn't hide my surprise at this unexpected visit from my in-laws. But I couldn't just ask them to leave without even offering them a cup of tea after they'd gone to all the trouble of coming over, given their advanced age. So I remained quiet. "This really is too small for 4 people," Luke's mother said before cuddling the twins and cooing about how cute they were. Then suddenly, "We renovated our house recently. Why don't you stay with us until your new house is ready?" At this unexpected offer from my mother-in-law, I was speechless. I'm in my late 40s, and I thought I was beyond being afraid of anything, but when it came to my mother-in-law's words, even I was rendered speechless. I felt as though I had been turned to stone by Medusa's gaze and couldn't move. Then, "The construction will probably take about a year, right? You've become part of our family, so why don't you let us pamper you a bit? We can look after these twin babies now that we're retired," my father-in-law said. You often hear about father-in-law and mother-in-law issues or trouble with in-laws. But I was ashamed of swallowing those stories whole and doubting the kindness of my in-laws. They are really wonderful people after all. They are Luke's parents, I thought. So that night, Luke and I discussed and decided to live with them until the new house was completed. A few days later, we left our furniture and appliances at home and only brought the necessary daily necessities to Luke's parents' house. They treated us grandly that night, but the following morning, they quickly showed their true colors. "Nancy, wake up." I was awakened by my mother-in-law at 5 a.m., just after I had fed the twins their milk at 3 a.m. and had finally gotten them back to sleep. "It's unacceptable to oversleep at your age. Get up and make breakfast for your husband. I'll teach you how to make Luke's favorite miso soup, so remember it well." I was exasperated by the early morning cooking lesson, despite hardly having had any sleep. I pleaded for a little more sleep, but she scolded me, saying, "I wasn't allowed to sleep when I was your age. You're about the same age as me, but you're too spoiled asking for more sleep because you're tired." She was the type of person who believed in experiencing hardship, as she had when she was young, rather than praising and encouraging. Not only was my mother-in-law a problem, but my father-in-law also had no sense of the atmosphere. "Excuse me, would it be possible to refrain from smoking indoors? We have a baby in the house." When I politely explained this to him after he lit a cigarette without a word at the dining table after dinner, saying, "What? This is my house. I can smoke wherever I want. It's none of your business," he got angry and refused to listen to me. Furthermore, when I left the table to look for an ashtray, my father-in-law put his cigarette ash in the soup I had made, which he hadn't touched, saying it was unpalatable. To make matters worse, he discarded his cigarette butt in the soup bowl. Having lived a poor life in my childhood, I was sensitive about food. I couldn't bear to see food disrespected, let alone wasted. That night, when I told my husband about the terrible way his father treated the food I made and how his mother forced chores on me, leaving me no time to rest, my husband sighed and said, "Isn't it your fault that the food you cook led to such a situation? It's obvious who's the villain here. My parents are very forgiving. All it would take is an apology from you. Let's go apologize right now. I'll accompany you. If you, as the twins' mother, lack the patience and endurance, our children won't grow up to be respectable adults like me." Upon receiving my firm response that I would never apologize, my husband, his face beet red, retreated to our room without uttering a word. The next morning, he left for work without eating breakfast. Surprisingly, he returned home partway through the day and thrust divorce papers in front of me. "What was that attitude yesterday? I'm your husband. Who do you think you are speaking to me like that? I'll divorce you. Now sign these divorce papers. He raged, so I replied, well, if you're the husband, then I'm the wife. Got a problem with that? Bring it on. I'll sign. Just hand them over. I promptly signed the divorce papers, affixed my seal, and handed them back to my husband. It seemed that losing the argument annoyed him, so he turned to his mother for backup, scurrying off to his parents' room. A 40-year-old man running to his mom because he was about to lose an argument, he was acting like a middle schooler. Such a man wouldn't have the guts to submit divorce papers. As for his mother, who came to his aid, she said, Luke is the backbone of the family. He goes out to work for all of us. We women must respect our husbands while protecting our homes. As expected, she sided with her son. I had thought living together would make raising our twins easier, but in reality, my in-laws didn't help at all with the children. What's more, while I had shared housework with my husband before, I now had to do it all myself. I was at my wit's end. This is 100 times harder than when I was raising the kids in that cramped one-room apartment. I've reached my limit, I told my husband. His response? My mom is doing her best for you, Nancy. Isn't it disrespectful to talk about her like that? And you should learn from my perfect mother. She's righteous. He was completely brainwashed by his mother's old-fashioned values. I realized it was impossible to continue the conversation. Early the next morning, I packed up our valuables, took our twins, and went back to our one-room apartment in the Marina District. The relief I felt at being able to raise my kids in peace was short-lived. I was shocked to find that the furniture and appliances I had left behind were all gone. When I called my husband, who had a spare key, he nonchalantly admitted to selling them to a buyer. When we move into our new home, we'll buy new appliances, right? Old appliances won't suit a new house, so I sold them. Also, our new place has built-in furniture, so I didn't think we needed ours. He had sold everything without my permission. What's more, he seemed thrilled over the phone that the smart appliances had fetched a good price. When I asked him to return the money he had made from selling our belongings, he claimed he had already used it to buy hot spring trip tickets as gifts for his parents. Furious, I threatened to report him to the police for stealing and using my belongings without my consent, to which he laughed and said, theft doesn't apply between family members, making a mockery of me. He even had the audacity to laugh, suggesting that I neither had the time nor money to consult with a lawyer given the expenses of raising our kids. Infuriated, I hung up and vowed to seek revenge on my husband's family. A few days later, he called me.
It's insane to depict our family in your comic. What were you thinking? I've had enough. The new house you bought will be a gift to my parents. It's the punishment for a disrespectful wife. Oppose me and it's divorce.
So, before I returned to my apartment in the Marina District, I had taken from his room to the ward office and submitted the divorce papers that we had signed. Soon after, I received another call, not from my husband, but from my ex-husband, trembling.
What do you mean by divorce? Why did you submit the divorce papers?
I could hear his trembling voice over the phone and imagine his pale face. The thought was so amusing that I couldn't help but burst into laughter. But wasn't it you who said you'd divorce me if I defied you? I retorted. He cried out.
I didn't mean it. I don't want a divorce.
I had no intentions of forgiving him, and to add insult to injury, I informed my ex-husband about the forthcoming publication of my comic essay, which detailed the harassment I endured from his family. Upon hearing this, Luke panicked.
Hey, I beg you, everyone in the publishing industry knows I'm your husband. If you depict my family...
What? Are you afraid it will be revealed that you still call your mother Mummy at night? When I taunted him, Luke said,
When a family member is in trouble, you help them, right? I took care of our twins because we're family.
Listening to him trying to make himself look good made me speechless. He then said,
Marrying you, Nancy, made me a lucky man. This divorce feels like an extension of a little squabble, right? Let's start over. We can make it work this time.
His sudden change of heart made it clear he thought my filing for divorce was just a childish pout. I asked him why he ignored the harassment I had received from my in-laws and why he had promised them a new house if he was now proposing to reconcile. His reasoning was apparently that his family was kind enough to let me live in their home for over 6 months for free. If I defied them, they would not let me live with them. If that happened, I wouldn't be able to live in the new house either. I wondered, why do people feel entitled to their spouse's belongings after marriage? His thoughts left me speechless, not with anger, but with utter disbelief. Apparently, my ex-mother-in-law had brainwashed Luke by telling him that I, an older single mother, would not be desirable to anyone else. That's why you ended up alone, right? She would say. My dear Luke was kind enough to take you in, so you should be grateful to us. Convinced that I would forgive anything, Luke begged me at over 40 with no place to return to.
Let's live together.
There is no way I can live with such an irrational person like you. Soon, I will ask for compensation through my lawyer for the furniture and electronics you sold without my permission. And don't forget that you tarnished my reputation as a publishing company's breadwinner. I hope your chair is still there when the holiday is over." I cut him off and hung up the phone. After that, we moved to our newly completed house. I received a couple $1,000s from Luke, which was far less than $1 million, for compensation and the sale of the furniture and appliances. Then I took a long vacation until my twins started elementary school and raised them with much love and time. Because I hadn't been active as a comic artist for nearly 6 years, some of my work started to gain a sort of mystery premium. My True Story, a collection of bride bullying stories, which I drew just before my long break, became a bestseller and was even made into a movie. I felt a mix of joy and embarrassment. But when these twin boys grow up, I want to teach them to always be on their future wife's side and be there for her, not their mother-in-law.